this month, Mandy, which is all about self-care. Just tell me, in a nutshell, what is our Enough experiment about?
Thank you, Suzy. The Enough experiment is a 12-month, I call it something you can jump in and jump out as it suits you. You don't need to be part of the journey from A to Z unless you want to be. So it's every month we have a particular topic that we work on. And this month, as Suzy said, we're talking about self-care. And what I do is, by using an experiment that I've co-created with an expert in that field, we start to experiment with, what does it feel, what would it feel like to be good enough in that specific aspect of our lives? And that's really with how we start to deal with the inner voice that pops up, some of our habitual behaviors. So where I'm hoping to get to at the end of this experiment in 12 months' time is that you have some new tools that you can start to take into your day-to-day life with not a huge time commitment. Like, these are really practical interventions that you can use in day-to-day life. So when that little pop-up comes up in your mind, or that voice is telling you you're not enough, you have a toolkit that you've created over the past several months that you can use to intervene and to deal with your inner critic and that not enough voice differently. That's what I'm hoping we'll get to.
Yeah. Well, I think, whether every woman I've ever spoken to, and also me, I kind of struggle with that, being enough. It's always been that whole thing around being clever enough, being beautiful enough, being athletic enough, whatever these things are. I know that I have struggled with that, and I see every one of my friends struggle with some aspect of that. So that's why I'm loving what you're doing with our Enough experiment. Today we're going to be talking about self-care. Tell us a little bit about what's the relationship between self-care and enoughness?
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that self-care is actually the foundation of feeling good enough. Because when we're in a period of our lives, say it's stressful or it's really busy at work, or, we've all been there, our self-care habits, the things that keep us happy and in a good mood and functional, those are the first things that tend to fall away. And it's really hard to feel good enough, or to be able to manage your inner critic, or to feel brave, or to, follow your curiosity, when all of those things that make you feel good come away. So I think that this is a super important month in the self-care experiment, or in the Enough experiment, because self-care is actually priming us to be able to handle anything that life throws at us, including our inner critic. So it's foundational. That's where I'm going. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think I was just saying earlier that I have therapy, and I had a therapy session this morning, and for me the kind of self-care piece is connected to honoring the self, to looking after yourself in a really, really big way. And it was the first time I'd actually put my finger on that. So I think you're onto something really big here, that self-care is a foundational piece for enoughness. I really do. But I think so many of us struggle with it, don't we? I mean, for me it's like indulgent. I'm a rocky,
Yeah.
toughy northerner. I don't do self-care. I just need to get on with it, kind of thing. So how do we get over that kind of feeling of it's only for sissies, or only for the self-indulgent ladies who lunch? How do you get over that belief?
Well, first of all, it's recognizing that we can't pour from an empty cup. You know that old chestnut, it's never been more important than right now. So for us to be able to help other people, our kids, our parents, our clients, anybody who needs us, if we feel depleted and we're in this place of energetic bankruptcy because we're not putting anything into our own tank, and in fact it's possible that we're actually borrowing from tomorrow's energy, and from 3 days time, and from a week's time. So it just leads to this place of energetic bankruptcy. So first of all, let's just be honest that that's not an empowered place to come from to begin with. So this idea of what if we reframed self-care, that it wasn't necessarily about putting a clay mask on your face and sitting in a bubble bath until you go all pruny and reading a novel and lying around eating bonbons, watching afternoon television? I mean, unless that's your thing, it can be that. But there's a bit of an unfortunate connotation around self-care that, as you said, it does tend to come across as self-indulgent. And it's not like, I don't have time for that. It's something that we can just dismiss. But this month's expert is Suzy Redding, who's authored multiple books. She's a psychologist, a yoga teacher, and I call her a wellness wizard because she's come up with this brilliant reframe that self-care is actually energy management. And I don't know about you, but that completely shifts the whole self-indulgent feel of it, because if we have lots to do, and let's face it, who doesn't, even now, we need to manage our energy. And the only way that we can manage our energy is by getting really clear on the kind of things that fill our tank. And it's not that self-care or energy management, if we prefer to use that term, it's not that it's me instead or me first. I think this is a really important way of reframing it. It's what Suzy says is it's me as well. Because the classic thing we do is we handle everybody else's challenges, and then there's never any time or energy left at the end of the day. And that's where we start to slide into energetic bankruptcy.
I mean, I love this metaphor about emotional bankruptcy and the idea of energy management. I think, if you can think of it like a bank and bankruptcy. So I hate it, it's kind of some of the models around capitalism, which is, you say it's they take all the money, and we're left with the slim pickings. There's the 1% of the rich at the top, and the rest of us were left, and a lot of people bankrupt at the bottom. So it feels like a very feminine principle of being able to do me and, you know what I mean, in terms of self-care and energy management. So if that was money, it's about how do we share the wealth, you know what I mean? So we're all empowered, and we can all spend in decent ways and not be bankrupt. So I love that idea. But in terms of energy management, are there any kind of, it's almost, how do we make that shift? So yeah, I hear you, is if you don't, it's like, how do you, it's almost like, for me, it's like a switch that you have to switch on to allow yourself to what's the word, allow it in, to receive. I think that's what I'm talking about. It's receiving. Care. And I think for many women, we don't receive. It's all about giving to others and looking after others. And I can be very judgmental about when I see people doing self-care, and I think, oh, they're very princessy. And what's that about? And that is because of my inability to receive.
Yeah. So when we don't permission ourselves to do that, I think we're still not seeing the value of it. And I totally get where you're coming from, because this will probably resonate with a lot of people watching too, that many of us have this massive portal for giving, for being helpful when we're needed. Call me at 2 a.m. I'll always be there with a lasagna. I'll look after your kids, whatever. So having this huge portal for giving, because that gives us the feels, it makes us feel useful. And then yet we have this tiny little pinhole for receiving. And often, I just did a podcast about this very thing. Why is it so hard to receive? And I was talking to a psychotherapist called April Boyd. And what she said is that often it feels very vulnerable for us to receive. It feels vulnerable for us to accept help because we may not trust that the other person has a good intention. They might hold it against us at some stage. It might feel that we tell ourselves a story that we can't cope. We can't handle it, and therefore we need to receive help. But what we do when we block receiving is we block connection. And I think really self-care on every level is including receiving, because receiving is a huge part of self-care. we're not meant to do it all alone. And that, there's this whole superhero martyr thing of like, oh, I need to be able to do it all on my own.
Yeah.
If we can trust that receiving is part of self-care and that the receiving comes from a good place and that we're actually facilitating connection, that by the other person wants to give something to us, if we're willing to receive it, of course it's a vulnerable position to be in, but it creates connection between us and the other person. And self-care is really about our ability to create connection with ourselves, first and foremost. And therefore, when we're in that place where our cup is full, therefore we can keep that good juju and that good chain going by being able to give to others.
Yeah. And I mean, I think I love that reframe, and also that piece around receiving. Self-care is receiving ourselves, so we might not be able to receive from other people's, but receiving that care from ourselves. That's what we're talking about, isn't it? So it's that valve of give, receive, and when that's faulty or a little bit, maybe needs a little bit of oil, that's it's such a huge important piece to work on. So in terms of some practical stuff around how we can grease that oil, I mean, I've got some Sarah Niblock. Hello, Sarah. Sarah is the CEO of the UKCP, and she's asking about, so many people are reporting tiredness from being on video conferencing all day. Practical advice for those who have no alternative to spend many hours on video calls, please. So that's a very practical thing. So in terms of, looking after ourselves in this time of lockdown, so we've been talking about the deep kind of maybe reframes that we have to make, but in practical terms, what does this mean? How do we look after ourselves on a daily basis? And specifically that one for Sarah.
That's such a great question. I think so many of us have Zoom fatigue, Sarah. So thank you for asking that question. What I do, I'm sure you have some tips on this too, Suzy, because you're probably spending a huge amount of your day online on video. I have to actually diarize self-care. So I try not to take back-to-back meetings, because I know that eventually my eyes will look like spirographs and I will lose my sense of humor. And then therefore I've got nothing to give. So how am I making some small regular deposits in my energy bank, to use Suzy Redding's terms? So it could be that for 15 minutes, I'm going to take my cup of tea and I'm going to go and sit in the garden and let the sun beam on my face for 15 minutes between calls. And it could be something like, I use the Calm app for meditation. There's a really great one that's like 12 minutes long, sound bath meditation. I love that one. I lay on the sofa and then I bounce back and I go back onto a call. So it can be small things, a cup of tea in the garden, a quick meditation, some stretching while you're waiting for the kettle to boil. Suzy also talks a lot about scent. So even after you've washed your hands, put on some nice smelly hand cream. And instead of just moving on, just sit for a moment and actually breathe in the scent of it for 30 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a piece about there. It's all about embodying something, isn't it? So for me, walking has allowed me to, walk around London, get onto the streets, feel the sunshine on my face. So I think Zoom can have this very weird feeling of just, we're looking at a screen again. And although we're trying to connect, there's this awful faux connection thing that's going on. And then, because people, if you're working with, my girls, my book club, oh my goodness. I mean, it's like they've never been on a Zoom call ever before. Their etiquette, they all talk at the same time. They're eating, they're running around and it drives me nuts. I'm like, sit down, don't move, So I think there's a piece about setting up the etiquette as well, so everyone listens to each other, because when they're all shouting at the same time, I just can't do it. It's too manic for me. Same time, and it's limiting that you're saying, Mandy, as well, limiting the amount of Zoom calls that you do, and so scheduling it in between, and then having off screen time and then real world time, and then planning those activities in, be it the smelling or the walking or the sunshine on your face, whatever it is, whatever's going to work for you. What about, are there exercises because sometimes people are so disconnected from their own self-care regime that they actually don't know what that means. So where would people go to start experimenting with their own self-care? You know what I mean? How would they do that? to try.
I'm glad you asked this. So
Yeah.
part of the experiment this month, which you can find if you go onto the website, it's under Better You. And there's a
Just put
worksheet.
your name in. If you put Mandy
Yep.
Lehto, all the enough experiments, and yours is the 8th of May, which is
It's number
self-care.
part 4.
Yeah.
So from there, you can download the worksheet, which is one of my favorite exercises that I use with coaching clients. It's called the When Life Works list. And this I got from a mentor, and I've done it several times. And it's just sitting down, with in a relaxing environment, somewhere where you're not in a rush, and actually just making some bullet points of think about a time when your life has worked in the past. And what type of practices did you have in place when life just worked for you?
Yes.
So it might be I was sleeping really well. I was walking every day. I was having real life human connection. I wasn't on back-to-back Zoom calls. Like I had quality time. I was
Yeah.
eating well. I wasn't just
Yeah.
eating garbage and living on caffeine. So you start to see a pattern. And if you think about 2 or 3 times when life just worked for you, because everybody will have different combinations.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean the experiment there isn't that you have to do all of those 50 things that you were doing when life works, because that's exhausting, even just thinking about it. But
Yeah.
how many of those things would you need to do for life to work now? And you start to experiment. Like if I sleep properly and I do a meditation and I have a walk, does that triad of things work for me? And if it doesn't, you experiment again tomorrow. You think maybe you need kind of 4 things or 5 things, and they can be changing. But it just brings awareness to how am I putting deposits in my energetic bank balance?
Yeah.
So
And
it's
yeah.
playing with that. So you can download that particular worksheet.
Thank you. So in every month, Mandy has different themes going forward. So be it creativity or self-care this month, where you can download the PDFs and start your own enough experiment. You don't have to start at the beginning. You can, this was the year of enough. And I think we've been slightly derailed by everything that's happened. But actually, it's a perfect fertile ground for us to be able to work, do the inner work. I'm certainly doing more inner work than I've ever done right now. But
Me too.
Just because I've got a little bit more time because I'm not going out in the evenings, but also because there's a lot coming up because I've slowed down. So all of that stuff that I've managed to keep under the surface through mass busyness is still coming up. So it's good. And also my thing has been walking. So my self-care is going walking every day. And as you're walking, I'm finding time to sort of think about things and have, memories come up. So it's a great time to process things as well. It really is.
Do you have other quick things that you do as well? So walking is one thing, but what about you? Like what are the deposits you make in your energetic bank balance, just to get
Okay.
people thinking?
And so for me, it's I've got the quickest, fastest way for me is to sleep, to nap, heat. So I have an electric blanket in my bed. So one of the things, if I'm feeling completely overwhelmed and I'm frazzled, I switch my electric blanket on, go to bed and put the duvet over my head. And if we were working in an office, with no way I could do that. But here I can just do a 20-minute power nap, and then I just feel completely different. And there's something about kind of cocooning. I mean, I'm living on a canal boat at the moment, so I don't have a bed, I have a cabin. So it's very cocooned. And I sort of go in there and cocoon for 20 minutes. So that's really important. There's walking, cooking. I mean, I hate cooking. I'm a really rubbish cook. But over the last lockdown, I've been cooking from scratch and making really lovely meals, and I've really enjoyed it. It's very grounding. So there's something for me about doing things that bring me into the real world, walking on the ground, cooking real food, and but looking after myself bodily, like sleeping, real basics, food, the real basics, actually the building blocks of self-care, nutrition, exercise, and sleep. So that's 3 things. Yeah. What about you? What do you do?
Very similar things. I'm a rubbish cook as well. But actually being in this place where what I've tried to do is, instead of feeling resentful as I'm chopping vegetables, I'm like, this is actually an opportunity for me to take care of myself and my family. So those things that feel like work, I somehow soften them. I can't say that when I tell myself, "Oh, this is self-care," like it magically transforms into something beautiful, but it does make me more aware. So if I want to go on a kind of a dog jog, which is like basically 50 yards of slow jogging and then mostly walking, and just to try to
Yeah.
get a bit of cardio, I never actually look forward to those, but I tell myself this is putting deposits in my energetic bank balance, and it will pay. That it's an investment in the rest of my day's energy. So it's not only the tasks I do, which are very similar to yours, but it's also bringing the awareness in the way that I engage with that task, that I start to notice that this is a way that I'm investing in myself so I can be at my best and I can give more to others.
Yeah, sure. That's a
Mm.
great way of doing it. I've just discovered Wim Hof, who's the
Oh,
Iceman.
yeah. Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my God. And I've just got really excited about him. So I'm taking a cold shower every morning and I'm doing this breathing exercise. But again, that's so off piste for me. I would never normally do anything like that. But anything. So I think it's an interesting time to experiment with perhaps things that you've never experimented with. So check out Wim Hof as well. He's really interesting. Um,
Mm.
Thank you so much for leading our enough experiment this year. That's given us a lot to think about. I think so many of us need a little bit of self-care in this very strange time that we're currently in. But whatever habits that we create now are just the perfect things to carry on when we're coming out of this. We're trying to learn the lessons, isn't it, while we're slowing down out of the great pause, as it's been called. But thank you so much for your time today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I hope you enjoy the experiment this month.
Yeah, thank you so much. Speak to you soon. Bye bye.